Digital Media presents Tales of the Sanctum, The Era of the Spellbound by Brian Joseph Johns. Episode 3, Ghosts of a Distant Future. Reality. Summer 2006. Neville walked slightly ahead of the group, with Nalani keeping pace beside him. She paid him little regard as he vied for the attention of the group, his voice most often the loudest and interrupting, a fact that Nalani had come to put up with. In a way, she felt sorry for him, for it was obvious that he was always trying to jut his way into the like of others, rather than simply being comfortable with himself. Gone were their school uniforms, their attire much more casual and expressive as teenagers on the front doorstep of adulthood. Nalani was dressed very casually and comfortably, and despite the growing heat, her latest plant necklace hung in place, centered on her breastplate, its green leaves and bright yellow flower standing out prominently beneath her cherry-red lips. Neville wore a stylish t-shirt, a rather expensive one for which he'd saved his pay from his part-time job for 2 weeks to be able to afford. The shirt sported a graffiti-like motif and a variety of bright colors, the sleeves just short enough that they revealed the stylish tattoos on both of his arms. Shayla walked side by side with Mila, Wes between the two of them, despite the fact that they talked around him, though they both enjoyed having his company where it was. He remained quiet mostly, enjoying hearing their banter and remarking little unless directly broached by them. Shayla, of course, wore the darkest of Gothic shades, a long black lace figure-hugging dress spanning down to her Dr. Martens, which fit her style perfectly. Her face was pale white with foundation, while her eyes were darkened with eyeshadow and liner, while her deep red lips underlined her entire look, her foreboding blue eyes standing out amidst the cacophony of shades. Mila, on the other hand, was the apparent bookend antithesis, wearing a white summer dress and a white sun hat, protecting her pale complexion and makeup-accented natural look, while Wes, between the two of them, seemed to be a great bridge for the dichotomy of their styles. He lay somewhere between Gothic, while still sporting a loose-fitting tie and a tweed vest atop of his button-down shirt, his dyed black hair messy and spiked. "No skateboard today, Neville?" asked Shayla, confronting him during a moment's silence in their conversation.
"The bearing casings are shot. Besides, I'm kind of done with it. Saving up for a moped. That way, I can pick Naluni up and drive her to summer school," Neville admitted to them. "Maybe in your dreams, but not on my flower here," Naloni responded defensively, gesturing to her eco necklace. "Can't blame a guy for trying." Neville's attention span was short, and after he'd replied to Naloni, he directed his gaze to another blonde-haired girl ahead of them on the sidewalk. "Excuse me, miss, you dropped something." Neville ran up to her and handed her a slip of paper he'd withdrawn from his pocket. She looked at the slip of paper and her eyes rolled, for on it was written his name and phone number. She picked up her pace to get away from them, rather than be the subject of an unfamiliar and possibly predatory group's amusement. "I love it when they run. I might not want what I haven't got, but I want more than anything what I cannot have." Neville laughed as the girl ahead of them picked up her pace, seemingly unfazed by the rejection he just experienced. "You disgust me," Naloni smirked at Neville. "What? Would you think better of me if I'd been crushed by your rejection of me? Of hers? Who's the creep now?" Neville challenged her. "You. Instead of waiting and trying again with me later, you instead went right away for the nearest woman matching my description. You don't want what you cannot have. You want what takes the least effort and gives you the first yes." Naloni reasoned with him, perhaps slightly flustered that he'd embarrassed both her and the other woman he'd approached. "True. I want someone just as desperate as me. Are you saying that you're worth it?" "You have no clue, do you?" Naloni responded. "If you'd have waited and tried again with her later, that would mean that you really want her," Wes responded to Neville's antics. "You're just jealous that I went for someone else, not to mention you'd have preferred it if I was destroyed by your rejection of me. Of hers. Who's the creep now?" Neville turned his back on her just as they arrived at the front door of their favourite tea shop, Reality. "Let's just get our morning tea and crumpets and get to class," Shayla interjected, already disgusted by Neville's behaviour.
"I take it that you two have a history?" asked Mila of Nelanie and Neville, as Wes secretly tried to stop her from asking, shaking his head and mouthing, "No, no," several times. Just as Neville was about to answer Mila, loud sirens announced the arrival of an ambulance as it pulled up to the corner shop neighbouring the tea shop. A pair of paramedics jumped out of the ambulance and retrieved a gurney from the back of the vehicle, then wheeling it into the front door of the corner lot shop. "What happened?" asked Nelanie, turning to face the shop. "That's the store the old man runs," Neville responded as a crowd slowly started to gather outside of the shop. Neville and Wes peered into the window of the shop, catching a glimpse of the paramedics performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation on a balding, older man who lay on the floor, unmoving. "I think he's pushing up daisies," Neville remarked, looking to the flower round Nelanie's neck. "Sorry," Neville added, a look of mischievous malice on his face. Nelanie just shook her head in disgust when out of the corner of her eyes she caught a glimpse of another man leaving the shop, a familiar man in a hood and cloak. "Look, it's Mr. Norbit," Nelanie exclaimed as the man turned to get a glimpse of her. Their eyes met, and time seemed to stand still. "One by one, they all will fall. The truth be gone, and that is all," Mr. Norbit said to her, as time remained at a standstill. "No!" Nelanie tried to scream, but nothing, no sound, no air, came out. Mr. Norbit then turned and disappeared around the corner, and a moment later, time resumed. "Who did you say?" asked Wes of Nelanie. "It was... I can't remember." Nelanie responded, the name and face now gone from her memory. Nelanie saw a vision of a withered squirrel caught in the grip of a man whose face she could not recall. "What happened?" asked Mila of Wes and Nelanie. "I saw someone who hurt squirrels. I can't remember. His name was just on the tip of my tongue," Nelanie responded, once again receiving a blurred flash of a memory. "He was wearing a cloak, and maybe a hood." Nelanie shook her head. "I think the old man's gone." Wes looked inside of the store through the glass window. A bald Japanese man, well into his 90s, appearing shriveled and gaunt, lay on the floor, his face lifeless. The paramedics lifted him onto the gurney. They then pulled a plastic cover over his face and wheeled him out to the ambulance. Mila watched as the old man was carted over to the back of the vehicle and carefully fastened within. The life that had once flowed through his body, and much like his memories, now beginning their journey into obscurity and effacement. Shyla looked up at the sign above the shop's front door. Sato's Curios and Treasures. Within the shop, they heard a yelping sound coming from a tiny animal. Nelanie and Mila immediately ran in through the front door of the shop and wandered within until they found an apartment in the back. There within, on a tiny cushion in a wooden box, a tiny pug puppy jumped up at the sides, yelping at them playfully. "He's got nowhere to go. They'll put him down." Nelanie spoke sadly as she bent down to comfort the poor little animal. Mila quickly grabbed a tiny blanket that lay beside the wooden box and used it to line her purse. She then bent over and picked up the puppy ever so carefully and placed him gently inside of it. "He's got a home now. I wonder if he's got a name." Mila stroked his head as Nelanie bent over and picked up a card that had been fastened to the wooden box. "Here," Nelanie handed the card to Mila, who then opened it and read it aloud. "To my best friend Mishima Sato on his birthday. May this new friend bring you much joy and luck. BW. P.S.
His name is Happy-Yuska. That's Japanese, isn't it? What does Happy-Yuska mean? Nelanie asked Mila. I think it means vomits happiness. Mila responded to Nelanie's question as she gently wiped the pug's face with a tissue. At that moment, an older man who had been in the shop as the events unfolded moved closer to Mila and grabbed her by the wrist. Startled, she looked to his face and for a moment saw someone very familiar to her, the feeling quickly receding only a moment later. The withered old man stared at her for a moment, a distant and foreboding look in his eye. "They'll take it all from you. Please believe me," the old man said to her, his lower lip quivering.
"Sato, he's gone." He released her wrist and then turned and headed out of the door of the shop and for the ambulance, getting in the back to accompany the deceased man on the gurney on his voyage to the morgue. "Mila, we'd better get out of here. I have a very bad feeling about this." Shayla arrived from outside of the shop. "Keep the puppies safe. Let's get our tea and make it to class," Nelanie urged Mila, Neville and Wes now tapping on the glass window from outside and urging them to pick up their pace. The 5 of them made their way into reality to get their tea and crumpets as a group of local workers arrived to seal off the old man's shop, putting a sign across the door. "Closed permanently. Those interested in the property and estate may send inquiries to Shepperton Real Estate Agency and the R. Evans Law Firm. Day of Truth, Night of Stars." Wes had decided that he'd be the one to open the door to their summer school classroom, as the class had already started and they were late. He figured he'd be the one to bear the brunt of the teacher's scolding of their tardiness, and so his hand gripped the doorknob as he turned and opened the door. He quickly scanned the room for a set of unoccupied desks, and upon having spied 5 of them together, he stepped aside between their 30-something teacher and his 4 friends behind him as they snuck their way to the desks he'd earlier spied. "Sorry, Mom," Wes said to her. She turned to face him, brushing her hair aside of her forehead. "For what?" she asked him. "For being late and interrupting class," Wes said humbly. "Relax, though don't make it a habit. The only reason that you're here is because the lot of you did horribly on your non-elective sciences. As much as you might like to get by in this world on charm and magic alone, you're going to need the help of the sciences, and in this day and age, more than ever," she said to Wes, looking to his 4 other friends as they found their way to their desks. "I'm Mrs. Truffleberry, though seeing as this is a summer class, you can call me Cheryl." She smiled at them as they found their seats.
"I know that the reason many of you are here is because you find maths and sciences boring. Let's face it, on a cold, bland page or a computer screen, some of this can seem very boring compared to, say, High School Musical or The Last Kiss. Until Apple, Microsoft, Google, or MindSpice invent a medium that brings the sciences to the masses in a very interesting way, like some of the more creative, publicly funded television channels, it's up to us summer school teachers to reintroduce you to it in a way that the teachers of the regular school year couldn't, given the sizes of their classes," Mrs. Truffleberry explained to them. Shayla and Wes looked around, only then realizing that there were actually very few students with them in the classroom. The entire class appeared to be about 15 people in all. At that moment, Happy-Yuska let out a tiny little bark from where his head poked out of Mila's purse in her lap. "Whoop!" Mila let out a yelp of her own, imitating the puppy. "Are you quite all right?" Mrs. Truffleberry looked to her, confused. "Just the hiccups," Mila replied, secretly tearing a bit of her crumpet and feeding it to the pug. Now that we're all comfortably, how many of you know what science actually is? Asked Mrs. Truffleberry of the class. One of the other female students, a pretty girl wearing thin-rimmed glasses, raised her hand. Miss Dorrans, Mrs. Truffleberry acknowledged her. It's the study of the world and the universe, Jessica Dorrans responded. Yes and no. Yes, in that there are sciences that study the world, geology, for instance, and there are sciences that study the universe, cosmology, for example. I need a more encompassing answer, and one that you might never have suspected. Maybe something you'd expect to find in a philosophy text, Mrs. Truffleberry hinted. Anybody? Mrs. Truffleberry continued. She waited, one of the students coughing ever so slightly. Science, to put it quite simply and yet very profoundly, is the search for truth, Mrs. Truffleberry told them, and waited for that concept to fully sink in. The search through all that obscures it, truth, how and what has happened, so that we might one day be able to use creatively what can and will happen, including what we can create ourselves using what we've learned from that truth. Mrs. Truffleberry wrote the word truth on the chalkboard, underlining it 3 times. Nelanie raised her hand.
Miss Ardblom, Mrs. Truffleberry gestured to Neloni. But what is truth? Asked Neloni. Now we get to the bizarre and sometimes confusing philosophy of the answer to the question of what is science. If science is the search for truth, then what is truth? Asked Mrs. Truffleberry. Wes raised his hand. Mr. Emerson, Mrs. Truffleberry got his last name correct as she acknowledged him. My backpack is heavy, that's truth, isn't it? He said, lifting it with both of his arms, it being filled with library books he'd planned to return after class. What about to someone like Mr. Cooper here? Our class athlete, it would seem. Mrs. Truffleberry introduced John, a tall, somewhat muscular fellow who humbly stood and bowed like a gent to the rest of the class, drawing a fair bit of laughter and at least one catcall whistle from one of the women. He blushed as he sat back down. Try lifting Wes's backpack, would you, John? Asked Mrs. Truffleberry of the student. John went over to Wes's desk, Wes handing him the backpack. John at first played along and seemingly dropped it because of the weight, again drawing some laughter. Just kidding, he said, then easily hefting Wes's backpack with one arm. It's a little heavy, not much though. I can easily lift it with one arm. John handed the backpack to Wes and returned to his seat. So it would seem that we have 2 truths simply by conducting science on Wes's backpack, Mrs. Truffleberry explained to them, pulled a scale from a cubby hole under the counter space at the front of the class. So let's deal with that by sorting this out so that we have one truth about Wes's backpack that we can all agree upon. Wes, could you bring your backpack to the front of the class? Mrs. Truffleberry adjusted the scale and then beckoned Wes to join her. He carried his backpack to the front of the class and lifted it up onto the counter. Now, place it upon the scale here and then read for the class what you see in the digital display, Mrs. Truffleberry instructed Wes. It says 6.5 kilograms, Wes said aloud to the class.
I'll confirm that for him and assure you that it does in fact say 6.5 kilograms in weight. There, we've conducted science and yielding truth from it, something that we can all agree upon as being fact. It's not 6.5 according to Wes and 3.2 according to me. The scale upon which we measured it says the same answer for both of us. Truth, Mrs. Truffleberry explained to the class. Mila raised her hand. Miss Wren Dubell, Mrs. Truffleberry gestured to Mila. My favorite kind of drink is raspberry bubble tea. Isn't that science? Asked Mila quite cleverly. Now we're getting somewhere. We have discerned something very important about the nature of truth, and therefore science. Mila's favorite drink is without a doubt her truth, but it might not be someone else's. Wes found his backpack to be very heavy, but to John it was a little bit heavy. How is it that they can both be right, but have different answers to the same question? Asked Mrs. Trufflebury of the class. The class remained silent as Mrs. Trufflebury waited for someone to respond, but nobody did. When it came to weighing Wes's backpack, we have one truth that is the same for everyone, but when it comes to something else, like whether something is heavy or not, or as someone's favorite drink or food, we can have more than one truth. One truth, in fact, for each and every person. Therefore, there are different kinds of truth. The truth relating to the weight of Wes's backpack is called objective truth. Objective truth is a kind of quality or measure for which there is only one answer, no matter who measures it. Subjective truth is a kind of quality or measure for which there can be a different answer for everyone who measures it. Therefore, science mostly concerns itself with objective truth, while sciences like philosophy quite often deal with subjective truth. Mrs. Trufflebury explained to them, sending Wes back to his desk with his backpack and allowing time for the concept to sink in throughout the class.
Remember how I said at the beginning of this class that truth is something that, assuming it doesn't change over time, can be used to predict and create things that we can use to better our lives. But it goes much farther beyond that. If we know where we've been and when and what happened accurately, both objectively and subjectively, we have something we can build upon, something stable that doesn't move or change, putting at risk everything we built atop of it. Science is just such a thing. But it just so happens that science had an early friend in the form of mysticism a very long time ago. A time when we obtained truth from a source that simply could not lie to us. That source was in the sky, the stars, the constellations. From distant places their light came to us from across the heavens to reveal to us the truth, as it happened somewhere so distant from us that millions, if not billions of years passed for that light, that truth, to reach us. For next class, I have a project for you. I want each of you to go to a library or read a book and research until you found what a constellation is, and which one is your favorite constellation and why. You're each to give me one objective truth about the constellation as well. For instance, the star Betelgeuse in the constellation of Orion is a red giant class of star whose apparent magnitude is 0.5. That's your homework. And on Friday evening, you are each going to attend with me a special class at 9 p.m. where we will visit the Norman Fisher Observatory and get a look at your favorite constellations in person. Be here at no later than 8:15 p.m. and we'll be taking a chartered bus from this school. Enjoy the rest of your day, and Wes, try to make sure you have your friends here on time next time. Mrs. Trufflebury smiled at them. Hapuska chose that very moment to yelp once again, causing Mila to hiccup loudly in order to cover up for the puppy. Hic, but pardon me. Mila blushed, causing the rest of the class to laugh as she tucked Hapuska's head back into her purse as she stood. Nelanie and Shayla stood with Wes, and the five of them left through the classroom door. Oh, and Mila. Mrs. Trufflebury addressed the young Japanese-Canadian artist. Yes? Mila stopped just shy of the classroom door, almost having evaded the scrutiny of the teacher.
Make sure you get your puppy a proper meal and home for next time. Mrs. Trufflebury revealed that she'd known about Mila's roost the entire time. Yes, Mrs. Trufflebury. Mila bowed once with an embarrassed smile on her face and then turned to catch up with her friends. of a curious nature. Well, that was ever so utterly boring and yet very captivating at the same time, Shayla said with pouty lips, which, despite that fact, still managed to hold Wes's attention quite thoroughly. That figures. I thought it was kind of uplifting, given the passing of that poor store owner, Naloni responded to Shayla's sardonicism. Now, that was sad, but to tell you the truth, we didn't really know him all that well, Shayla reminded them. I went in there once and picked up an old dusty book from his basement collection, but I never read it. Something about mysticism, though. He was very sarcastic to me when I bought it. He said, "Oh well, another great book falls victim to the ever so deteriorating grip of pop culture. I suppose next time I see you in here, you'll be wearing the t-shirt with the book's title as if it had been your bling all along." Wes admitted to them what he'd remembered about Sato. Mila somehow found the statement to be very funny and covered her mouth as she laughed at Wes's recollection. "I never met him, but that strange man that grabbed my wrist, it was like I knew him," Mila then admitted to them. "What? That dirty old man? He was very strange, a bit creepy too. I'd never seen him in that store before and I've been there a few times. The puppy wasn't there last time I went in, and that was only a week ago," Naloni finally admitted to them. "So the puppy was a gift given to him by BW then?" Mila confirmed with her friends, showing them the card that Naloni had given to her when she'd found the puppy. "I guess so. BW. We could ask around maybe," Neville suggested, suddenly interested in anything that might help him repair his dwindling friendship with Maloney. "Mr. Norbit, that's who I saw at the shop." "You mean that guy that hates squirrels?" "And tried to take you away from me. I mean, us," Shayla added, quickly correcting herself, though her foundation hid the fact that she was blushing over her own words.
Yes, the same one. The man whose grasp seemed to wither everything. Naloni described for them, recalling her experience as a little girl outside of the school. "And I think that we should look into this," Mila urged them. "I have to return my library books, but afterwards?" Wes responded to Mila and then turned to Shayla. "Sounds like a mystery to me. Might be fun. A lot better than looking up constellations in a book," Shayla said to them. "We can do both at the same time. But first, let's get my books back to the library, and then we can check out Sato's store again," Wes suggested. "I still have the puppy with me. We need to get him somewhere safe, and somewhere he can, Mila said to them, opening the purse enough so that Happy Usaka could poke his little head out and watch the world as they walked the streets of Shepperton. "There's a park across the road from Sato's shop. We can take him for a quick little run there," Neville suggested, softening his approach, which seemed to draw Naloni's forgiveness of him. "Not to mention, he might be able to tell us something while we're there," Naloni suggested. "And I suppose you can speak with animals, can you?" Neville responded, slightly sarcastically, losing a bit of ground with her. "That's Nature Girl. She can speak with birds, cats, dogs, you name it. If it's got fur or feathers, she's a walking translator for them," Shayla remarked sarcastically about Naloni. "Then it's decided. To the library first, and then to Sato's curios and treasures." Mila stroked Happy Usaka's head gently as the five of them began their journey into the second half of their day. "So, who exactly is this Mr. Norbid to whom you referred?" Mila asked of them as they exited the library. "Remember how we said that something happened to us a year ago that we all agreed never to speak about again?" Wes began. "You mentioned that earlier," Mila agreed. "The three of us, Wes, Shayla, and I, were in our last class of the day. Our regular teacher for that class, Mr. Corkum, was away, and so there was a substitute teacher, someone who introduced himself as Mr. Norbid," Naloni explained to Mila.
And that's when things got really bizarre, Wes added. And Neville wasn't there, confirmed Mila. Nope, I was in another class sweating beads that day, Neville explained to Mila. Mr. Norbid started quizzing us about history, especially about the time of colonization in the 1600s, and that's when the storm started just over the school. The roof disappeared, and the three of us was somehow at the foot of a pyre that was being set to burn Wes to cinders, Melanie continued again. Who was going to burn him? Asked Mella. Mr. Norbid. He literally grabbed hold of Wes and tried to cast him into the pyre, but we held on to him, Shayla interjected. With a little help, Melanie began, pausing as she arrived at the part where she'd have to explain the details. Help from who? Neville, confirmed Mella. Nope, I was still tearing up turf jogging for gym class, Neville stated quickly, as if to be sure that none of their topics stuck to him. My plant necklace, Melanie said quietly. Your plant necklace? You mean it helped you? Mella seemed quite shocked by the prospect, though it was not beyond her imagination. It's all right, Melanie. Let me explain. She doesn't want to say because you'll think she's gone off the deep end. Bonkers, if you get my meaning. Wes stepped in for Melanie. My plant necklace freed itself and became rooted in the dirt around us. It quickly grew large enough to anchor both Shayla and I to the ground, helping us to hold on to Wes against Mr. Norbid, who you said was trying to put Wes into a pyre to burn him, right? Mella confirmed with Melanie, speaking seriously about the matter and without belittling Melanie for their outlandish experience. Yes, Mr. Norbid said that Wes was breaking the line. What line? Mella pressed them further. The line between Shayla and I'd imagined. We never gave it much thought after that experience. We've always been like sisters to one another. Yes, a lot of bickering and criticism of each other, Shayla agreed with Melanie's statement. In the way that we're close, though in all truth we're not related, Melanie admitted. And Mr. Norbid definitely thought that was something Wes was interfering with, hence why he tried to toss Wes into the fire, or at least so we reasoned just after the experience, Shayla surmised.
And then we were suddenly back in class, on the same day, without the thunderous weather, and Mr. Corkum was there taking attendance, and that was it. I was thoroughly convinced that I was bonkers at that moment and was ready to check into a rubber room, if you get my drift, except that Shayla and Naloni confirmed that we'd all experienced the same thing. The pressure in their conversation built up as it accumulated in Wes. They saved me. I know we said that it was like a group hallucination between us, but in all honesty, I don't know what would have happened if Mr. Norbid had won and I'd been thrown into the pyre. Shayla and Naloni saved me. It saved me. Her plant necklace. Wes pointed to the blooming flower around Naloni's neck. We saved each other, Shayla corrected him, sharing a subtle but heartfelt smile. Is that the only time this sort of thing happened? Asked Mila. So far, yes, Wes replied. No, when I was a little girl, maybe 10 or 11, I had an encounter with Mr. Norbit, and that time it was a sunny day during the lunch break at school, and I was feeding the squirrels over by my favorite tree when Mr. Norbit shows up in a dark cloak and all and grabs up the mother squirrel in his hand, Naloni interrupted Wes. He asked me if I liked talking to animals and said that I was a special child because I could. That's when I noticed that he was hurting the mother squirrel, Naloni explained to Mila, as well as the rest of them. How? Asked Mila. He wasn't being violent or anything. He was just stroking its head, but it was strange, like the squirrel was caught in a trance, and it began aging, withering, as if time was suddenly moving very quickly. Even the grass and plants around Mr. Norbit, it was all withering, and that's when I screamed. Naloni was lost in that moment of nearly a decade earlier. I take it someone came to help you,
asked Mila in shock. Yes, the birds. They flew down from the tree and began attacking Mr. Norbert. He disappeared, and the mother squirrel slowly regained her health, though she'd clearly lost something by the experience. She ran off with her little ones, and that's when the teacher came to get me. Naloni finished her recollection of her tale. No, Wes isn't bonkers. All three of them certainly are, though, I'd have to agree, Neville remarked sharply, perhaps trying in his own way to diffuse the tension, only to have it backfire on him.
My hero. Naloni pushed Neville away and moved closer with Shayla to Wes's side. Neville kept the mischievous smile on his face, while inside it hurt him that his role in life often seemed to turn out that way. So you have had very unique experiences in life, perhaps even paranormal, confirmed Mila. It's not me for sure. My life was pretty boring until I met them, Shayla and Naloni, Wes admitted. Thanks, mate, Neville responded to Wes's statement, taking it personally as they'd been friends since they'd met 5 years earlier. What are friends for? Wes responded sarcastically, still a bit edgy that he'd even joked with Shayla and Naloni about such a difficult topic. What hurt Neville the most was that he'd not been part of the experience that had helped Wes to form such a strong bond with Shayla and Naloni, that he'd always be on the outside of their mysterious experiences, and that he'd lost the chance to prove himself to Naloni. Mila could see much of what was going on from behind her intuitive shroud, though she dared not delve into those aspects of their interpersonal relationship. She hoped that with time, that the four of them would have a much better understanding of each other, especially given their proximity near and far from these experiences. Neville might have been a jerk at times, but he often bore the weight of fault for his friends unbeknownst to them. Neville clung fearfully to his masculine, as if he'd be losing something he'd never be able to get back simply by trying to put himself in Naloni's shoes. Wes, on the other hand, had demonstrated that he had no issue with delving into the feminine aspect of life when making effort to understand the opposite sex, all the while retaining a confident hold on his masculine side without it dictating his conduct or treatment of the opposite sex. What Neville resisted so fervently kept him confined to the extreme of his understanding of what it was to be a man, while to Wes, that very idea meant something very different. Mila respected Wes for reaching out to Shayla in the way he was, for she knew that theirs would be a very difficult path on the road to finding each other. For Naloni, and as much so for Neville, she could see that the hurdle they faced involved their overcoming of the extremes, the ability to meet each other in the middle, and without the natural reaction that fear could muster to polarize even the most balanced of souls.
Fear. Like what she'd experienced in her nightmares, watching her parents depart on an airliner that was ultimately destined to explode in a fireball and come crashing to the ground, all on board, dead. Mila was well acquainted with fear, and it was something with which she'd contended every day, secretly keeping it at bay while fooling everyone around her into the idea that she was perfectly perfect. She could see what it was about her friends that kept them so close together and so far apart, and yet she could do little to heal herself from the same. In both cases, she kept quiet about such matters altogether, both in her dialogue with her friends and with her own inner dialogue of coming to terms with her new life. When they'd mentioned the fact that Mr. Norbert had referred to Wes as having broken their line, she immediately discovered that Mr. Norbert was in fact correct. There was a line between Shayla and Naloni, as much so as there was a line between the two of them and herself. The three of them were so uniquely different, and yet shared something so very impossible for others to understand. Even as they'd gotten to know each other, going over the details of their experiences, they began to develop their own internal language between each other. a language completely obscured from Neville, and a language whose short glimpses Wes would occasionally find himself privy to. You seem to be quite interested in our side of things, but you've shared nothing with us about yours. Shayla took the bold step forward to confront Mila on the current state of imbalance between them. And Mila intuitively understood the situation, even before the words had left Shayla's mouth. We're sharing an awful lot with someone who appears to be reciprocating very little thus far. Nelanie agreed with Shayla, both of them already knowing that Mila had similar experiences she was withholding thus far.
I only asked because I'm experiencing some things of my own, things often difficult to explain, like when I woke up at 4 a.m. today to start a painting of the night sky from my back deck. By the time I'd finished it 2 hours later, I'd not painted the night sky, but a scene of something that actually happened across the lake from my home. An hour after I'd finished the painting, a utility shed maintained by Shepperton caught fire. I heard the sirens, and so I got on my bicycle and rode over to the site, a short trip which took me about 4 minutes. When I got to the scene, I took a photo with my phone that depicted a group of firefighters putting out the fire, which had grown to become a considerable blaze by that time. When I got back to my painting, I compared the photo with the painting and found them to be almost identical, except that I hadn't painted a scene depicting firefighters. I painted a scene in the evening depicting a group of campers seated around a campfire. However, the painting and the photo looked almost identical, and that wasn't the first time that has happened. Mila paused. The truth is that ever since I started painting, every single one of them has depicted a situation that occurred later, sometimes much later than when I'd finished the painting. Mila explained to them. Mila reached into a side pocket on her purse, pulling forth a laminated photograph from within. She then handed it to Shayla, who took a look at it, immediately recalling having seen the painting before. This was the painting on your wall. I've seen this painting before. On the telly. It was on the news. A general interest story on art or something like that. It's quite a piece. Like a pocket of light hidden within a dark halo of shadow, like the night sky, Shayla remarked about the photo, handing it over to Leloni, who then passed it to Wes and finally to Neville. I was paid several million for that painting. I finished it 2 months before the accident, Mila told them, wiping a tear from her eye as she pulled forth another laminated piece of paper, this one from a newspaper a year earlier. It was a photograph taken from a specialized camera at the Air Traffic Control Tower at Pearson International Airport. The photo and the news story accompanying it depicted an airliner exploding into a fireball only a minute before it plummeted into the ground, killing all on board. The painting is almost identical to the photo, Wes said in disbelief. That was the airliner where my parents, they're gone now, Mila said to them as she struggled to keep herself from breaking down. I finished that painting 3 months before the accident, and the whole time it was trying to tell me, to warn me. Or maybe it wasn't that at all. Maybe I made it happen. Mila's tears flowed despite her best efforts to stop them. All at once, Shayla and Nelanie understood Mila as she was laid bare before them. Nelanie wondered how differently things might have turned out if her plant had, instead of trying to save Wes, had tried to kill him. Shayla wondered how differently things might have been if, instead of the horror that tried to snatch her having ended up in the jaws of that tremendous feline hunter, if it had been her that was the prey. They were, all three, privy to abilities beyond the comprehension of most, let alone each other.
Yet they had no idea about such things or where to begin in understanding them. "I'm all right." Mila wiped her eyes once again and continued as they arrived at the park across from Sato's Curios and Treasures. Happyuska immediately recognized the smell of the area and began yipping excitedly, trying to jump from Mila's purse. She placed her purse on the grass and zipped it open. Happyuska jumped out of the purse and hopped along in the grass, quickly finding a place to relieve himself, which he did unabashedly, even wagging his little tail after having done so. He sniffed the area around the picnic bench the group had chosen to remain seated before jumping back into the purse again. "I'm beginning to see what Mr. Norbid was talking about when he said that we have a line." Shayla looked to Nelanie and then to Mila. Mila nodded affirmatively. "That we do. Now let's see if we can't piece the mystery of Sato and BW together, shall we?" suggested Mila. "Look, there's a specialty shop for pets right there, a few doors down from Reality and Sato's. I bet you that Happyuska would love a designer biscuit or two," Nelanie suggested, already going through her purse to see if she had enough money for such a purchase. "Put your money away. I'll get it for him, and lunch for us too after we've checked into the mystery of Sato's shop," Mila assured Nelanie, then looking to Shayla and Wes and Neville in turn.
Mila picked Happyuska, purse and all, up from the ground, and the 5 of them made their way to Sato's shop. To be continued in Tales of the Sanctum, Era of the Spellbound, Episode 4, Twisted Paths and Missing Pieces.